All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for joining Mr. Kevin Hawthorne. I see in the comments, if you're joining this live or if it's on replay, feel free to comment, ask us questions. I've got a special guest today, Director of Sales, Nash Paradise, a special edition of the Monday Market Update for Veterans Day. You guys are in for a treat. We're going to talk about the future of mortgage interest rates, the future of real estate inventory, and all kinds of other stuff because we've got the mortgage wizard, Mr. Nash Paradise, on with us today.
Hey, it's the Loan Wizard. It's trademarked. I need you to be very careful with that. They wouldn't give me the Mortgage Wizard. Someone else has it trademarked. But we're not here for the minutia of the branding. And it is just awesome to be here, hanging out with my buddy, Mr. Gougé himself.
Yeah,
the dude with the good. I am thrilled to be here, sir, and excited to talk rates and neat, fun stuff.
Yeah, we're going to talk all kinds of stuff, and really, like the goal of this, and the goal with like my whole, YouTube channel, anything I put out on social media is to give people a little bit of like behind the curtain on, what's going on, what we're seeing as professionals, because, if I talk to a nurse or I talk to somebody who's a firefighter, like I wouldn't know what goes on in a firehouse or what processes they have in a hospital. And so it's like a behind the scenes look, right? People that are in this stuff all day, every day, both of us, Nash, I think bring a great perspective because we're actively originating. We're not talking about like back in 1997 when I used to originate loans, here's what happened. Like we're originating loans. We're talking to real estate agents. We're deciding, whether, this person should lock at the 6.625 at a 1.5 cost or 6.9.5 points. So like we're in it every single day. You're talking to, professional active fighters, not someone who retired and, is in the UFC Hall of Fame. So enough with analogies, brother. Let's get on. First, we'll go over some mortgage rate numbers and, some of the numbers with the Fed housing. And then we'll get, some hot takes from a couple guys who are actively in it. So do you use this Mortgage News Daily chart just to give you kind of a rough average, Nash? Do you ever pop on to Mortgage News Daily?
Literally all day, every day. It's up. That's the nice thing about having a couple 34-inch screens and then a laptop screen and a 4 screen is my ADD is just at full satiated all the time. And so, yeah, I'm MBS Live guy and Mortgage News Daily. I've got up in front of me all the time. So I knew what this was as soon as it popped up. Big smiles for me.
Sweet. So if you're listening to this, if you're watching this and you haven't been paying close attention to interest rates, mid-September, the 2 meetings ago for the Fed, now that they met last week, they cut the Fed funds rate by 50 basis points, and then whoopsie daisy, rates went up for 6 straight weeks to 7%. So I'd like to hear from boots on the ground, like what's been buyer sentiment and what have you been hearing from buyers and agents? It felt like mid-September, people were all excited. Rates are coming down, 6.1. We're going to be in the 5 soon. And then, as you can see from the chart, right, it's like a quick U-turn and we're back up. What are people in the street saying, brother?
I would, if I had to apply one word to this, I would say misalignment or incongruent. Because it was funny, and you go June, July, even back to May, I kept hearing, we'd like to take action, but we want to see what happens with the election. I mean, we knew for a while now that things were going to be a little interesting. People wanted to see what's fourth quarter going to look like. How is the Fed going to impact these? And then all of a sudden, we start getting rates in the low to mid sixes, and now the election's not that important anymore. Now it's, oh, well, hey, I don't want to miss the bus. And I think that just goes to show that, the top loan officers and the people who are, leaders in this business have been having those conversations of, hey, hold on, as soon as these things start going down, you want to be first in line. You don't want to be waiting until the news cycles catch up to where the interest rates are, because then you're going to be competing with a whole new set of buyers. Here in my market, I'm in North Texas, we have an inventory shortage. It's always been a pretty stable market, but not enough homes for sale. So as soon as those rates dropped, we saw a huge uptick in applications because no one wants to get left behind. That became a fear, and that fear was a powerful motivator. Next thing you know, Fed drops rates. Oh yeah, hey, I heard everything's cheaper. Well, now we've got a misalignment with expectation versus reality. Rates start going up, and all that enthusiasm, if I don't want to be left behind, went back to, oh yeah, but now let's see what happens with the election. But ultimately, I think what that uncovered is people cared a lot more about their affordability than, their future outlook on where the country was going.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's interesting now that we sit here, post-election, and I think regardless of who people were voting for or, what side of the aisle they were on, a lot of people, like, that uncertainty is gone, right? Like, that's done and behind us. And so I feel like there's a certain cohort, maybe it's not a huge amount of people. They're like, okay, that's behind us. That's been decided. Now I'm going to go out and buy a house. I don't know. Are you seeing people come off the fence? Do you think it's going to take rates headed back down to really get people to jump off the fence?
It's going to take messaging. Honestly, I recorded a few videos last week and then found one I really liked at the end of the week and sent it to 20, 30 agents. And it was just a quick 5 minutes on, what does this mean now? And I'm sure this is something y'all were talking about last week is, hey, once the election is done, once the Fed, the last time Powell was speaking, that was a very big Fed meeting, post-election, getting into, what's he going to talk about? Is he going to address the fact that there's a Trump presidency? Is there going to be any kind of headbutting between Powell and Trump? Just really getting an idea of where things are going as we get into this, 2025 market. So just giving, agents, giving partners, giving borrowers just some talking points and understanding, what are the projections looking like now? Like there were three options for the election. It's either Harris, it's either Trump, or it's close and there's chaos. Yeah, you can put the Civil War in option 3 too. I mean, there are a lot of people that had those kind of fears. So now that we have some clear direction, it's okay. What does this mean? Like, it's funny. There's messages that say, okay, well, Trump, inflation should get worse. But then, hey, what about jobs and government jobs? What about tariffs? So I think we just entered into a world where the questions are still there. They've just completely changed. And that's where, the people that get the right message from the right voices are going to have the advantage as, rates start slowly trickling down.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, let's look, because I haven't looked at this chart, honestly, since, all the happenings of last week, which was, not only the presidential election and those results, but Wednesday, Thursday, Fed meeting. Like you said, Jerome Powell came out and spoke, and, we knew a 25 basis point rate was coming. We just didn't know what he was going to say or how he was going to answer some questions. I only tuned in for the fun questions, like, are you going to resign if you feel pressure from the new presidency? He said, yep. He was very succinct. He said, no. And then they followed up with another question. He said, no. So holy moly, at age 44, my eyes, that left-hand side is, geez Louise, dude.
So yeah, you've basically
this is December meeting, right?
Yeah, this is the December meeting summary of the dot plot. Probability on, the projections, either that the 425 to 450 mark, which is going to be, another 25 to a half, or, 450 to 475, which, is just a quarter. So interestingly enough, this actually didn't look like what I expected to see for the December meeting. And I think the biggest takeaway for me from what Powell said is we're still data driven. And, right. This week, obviously Wednesday this week is going to be huge to establish what the data is going to look like. But this looks like the majority of the dot plot is in support of another 50 basis point move, 25 to 50, as opposed to 0 to 25 at that December meeting.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty interesting to see that like 2/3 of the people think we're going to get 50
Well, I mean, I guess technically speaking, they like to call that 475 a 450 to 475 on the
Right.
target rate. We focus on the 0.25% drop, but literally speaking, it's 450 to 475. So
Oh,
I
so
guess
this is actually
it is just
one
another
third of
quarter.
them say no move, and
No
then
move.
two
Yeah.
thirds are 25 base point. Okay, yeah. For some reason, I was thinking it was 25.50, which would surprise me, especially like you say,
Yeah.
if people are worried about like reigniting inflation and
There's
Trump
no
meaning.
room for a 50 bip drop right now. So yeah, they're just calling that the 425 to 450 on the quarter.
Okay, yeah, this makes more sense. This aligns with kind of what they've talked about and whatnot. So let's check out the next slide, which will be the January meeting, I believe, and then we've got 425 to 450, which is still just a quarter down from where we're at. So one cut between the next two meetings is the favorite so far, right?
Well, it's a favor, but this isn't a more interesting set of dots. Like if you looked at the revised, I always like to look at the dots and the percentages because I feel like it gives me more of an insight to the actual thinking and thought process behind here. Like, yeah, now we've moved to half of the people, like a smaller percentage, say we're still going to be at that quarter point from where we are right now. I think it's really interesting that out of the, what was it, 40 something percent or 39% something that said no move in December, only 23 of those still say no move in January. But really, if I think the better way to look at this and interpret this is that you've got 77% of Fed chairs saying that we're going to be going at least that quarter between now through January, and now a 22% group of people are thinking quarter and a quarter, which obviously I think is a little too aggressive, but at least 77% are feeling really strong about another quarter between now and January.
Yeah, for sure. I'm interested too because you mentioned data, the Fed still being data driven, and for anybody watching, give them a quick lesson on what data's coming up, what the Fed's looking at, and how that might affect their decisions, and really ultimately like mortgage interest rates, which I think is what people are most concerned about. Like, what economic data can help me get into a house for 5.5% interest rate?
There you go. Core CPI, baby. All about that
Yep.
CPI.
Yep.
So, I mean, the Wednesday this week is going to be huge. This is going to be our first set of CPI numbers post-election, post-Powell. Does that matter? Obviously, this information is not impacted by that whatsoever, but it's going to show where's the money? Like, where do the billions and billions of dollars go? That's what drives everything. Everything's being driven by, the big cash. So where is the October core CPI right now? I guess the forecast, the projection is 0.3%. Previous meeting was 0.3%. So we're looking for some consistency there. That's one that if we miss the mark either way, you're going to see big money movement in the bond market. The bond market has been way volatile. And, we had a lot of money coming out of it, drove yields up and into the stock market right after the election. People were trying to get, that quick hit on the Dow, and they did. They knew it, and they did it. That's why interest rates went up so sharply and then, settled back down, thankfully. But, if we miss on core CPI, and I see the potential where we could be lower, inflation coming down a little bit, which could really be a nice thing for overall markets. If we miss the wrong way, I feel like it's going to set some panic in. But the year over year core, that's going to be big. We're at 3.3% before, 3.3% is a projection now. Everyone is really banking on some consistency with these numbers. And any kind of miss either way on the core CPI is going to make the markets really volatile and, in the short term, as people are going to get in there and try to make money. And after that, we've got a few Fed speeches this week, nothing real crazy. Producer prices coming out on Thursday is not going to move anything. Continued claims will be interesting. Jobless claims have had some pretty good impact into bond pricing in the UMBS securities, which is what drives mortgage rates. But I think looking back into last month, I'm sure y'all talked about it, really getting into the giant miss that we had on non-farm payrolls. I think there's a lot of eyes on that when we get back into it later in the month. Missing by over 100,000 is huge. And I think all eyes pointing forward, there are a lot of people arguing that, non-farm payrolls have been off forever. These $200,000 or 200,000 job add month over month have been so heavily influenced by government jobs that, Trump's commitment to reduce a lot of these positions, to slow down government spending by, just straight up eliminating tons of government jobs, could have some huge impacts on non-farm payrolls. But I mean, that's something we're going to be looking in, first and second quarter of next year. But I think all the non-farm payroll in that lead up to it is actually going to move the marker a lot more than it used to, because that's going to be a better indicator of where the overall labor market is headed.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. That was the one that came in like 12K, right? Like just humongous.
Off of like a 179K projection in a previous like 289 that was then, revised down like 80,000. Like no one cares about the revision. We've had, over 1 million jobs revised in the last 12 months. And yet everyone just cares about the data, which just shows no one actually cares. They're just trying to make money. Okay.
Yeah.
But it makes it hard for us because, we're trying to save money. We're trying to tell borrowers when to get in, when to be aggressive. And, the market movers are just pumping and moving and getting stuff out there. But like, it's not real numbers. No one cares. But, it's going to impact interest rates. So we got to know where it's going.
Right. Yeah. And I think that you said it earlier, and I'm in total agreement. Like people who are thinking about buying housing, whether it's your primary residence, whether it's investment property, no matter what it is, like you don't want to wait until rates have come down significant enough that it's reached like your newspaper and your local news, like interest rates at 5.5, because then what happens is, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of buyers that are kind of like, I might buy, I might not, or like, 5.5%. No, I'm going to make it happen, but you're making it happen at the same time everyone else is. And you've got, not a lot of inventory and a lot of demand. Like you don't have to be an economics PhD to realize like that pushes upwards on prices. And anybody who remembers just a few short years ago, like you don't want to operate as a buyer in a market like 2021. Not saying we'll ever get back to that, but competing against 15 offers because there's only 3 homes available in a specific zip code, like it's not fun for the buyer. It kind of forces you to remove contingencies you should have in place, pay more than you'd like. And so I think these next 3 to 6 months, honestly, are going to be a great opportunity for buyers to go out there and find some deals. Before we move on to the last slide, I just want to get your kind of cliff notes for a simple public school guy like me. Core CPI, projection is 0.3 for the month over month. Projection is 3.3 for year over year. Like you said, if we miss either way, it can be a market mover. What do you think happens to what everyone cares about, interest rates, if month over month comes in hotter than expected, 0.4? And the year over year, we'll just, for example purposes, say that one came in hot too, and it's above 3.3.
Here's the neat thing. So I've been doing this 19 years now, and I've always considered myself very deep into the minutia of how rates work. Where is this stuff going? I was always fascinated. I was like, man, if these people are like, I'm a smart guy, right? I think I'm smart. How are these people making all this money just by being smart and learning these things? So I'm like, I'm going to learn these things. That it doesn't matter right now. And that's what's bizarre is, typically if you miss on inflation and inflation is higher inflation is bad. That points towards, the Fed recovery not working very well. That should send money into bonds, which should drop their yields and see mortgage rates fall a little bit. Bad inflation's not good. Like Fed action not working, we should actually get a little bit better. We've had a lot of the opposite reaction. If inflation is getting lower and pricing is coming down, like obviously, now we're going to have slightly higher spending, but the inflation isn't making a difference to the pocketbooks right now. People aren't seeing like the cause and effect right now is not necessarily a causality. It's a lot more correlation. So it's where does the money want to go? How is the bond auction going to be? And so this is one of the first times in my career where that volatility, we could have, an inversion on, typical behavior. And we've had it a couple times this year where we've missed badly in a way that rates should get a lot better. And they didn't. I'm like, things are going bad. Like the economy is getting worse. People are having to slow down spending. Rates should get lower. Like things should come down in price because you're not seeing as much going on. Like there should be that. Nope. Exact opposite. Like things got worse and rates get higher. Things got worse, rates got higher. Like rates got higher because in 2020, 2021, we added $4 trillion into circulation, something like that. Spending went rampant. You couldn't find anything. There's supply and demand issues. This is definitely not a Cliff Notes version, but, I like to rant. Things got higher and inflation got bigger and rates went up to slow things down. Spending is slowed. Like a 3.3% inflation rate is not out of line with where we've been. But if you look at the alignment between current inflation, current bond yields, and current interest rates, they are not aligned. The margin between the 10-year Treasury yield versus the average overnight 30-year fix is one of the highest I've ever seen. Like, it is stretched out there. I remember back in the day, man, we used to be 1.5%, maybe 1.6 over the 10-year Treasury yield. That was pretty nice. We'd be, kicking friendly at, in the high fives right now, but we're not. There's an extra percentage point built in there because of volatility.
Right.
Because by the time those get bundled and backed into mortgage-backed securities and sold, you got to be able to account for all those massive market movement. So, I mean, I'd love to have great projections right now, but I think, like you said, the best takeaway is if you're ready, you want to be ready now. By the time they get dropped, it's going to be too late. And if we keep seeing smooth movement in these next couple of months of CPI, then I think we can actually start to come back to where we could project some nice, even lateral declines where things are just better slowly. That would be great. We haven't seen that in the last year.
Yeah, no, a lot of great points. And I've watched that 10-year versus 30-year, which is wild. Like, for anyone listening, like, for example purposes, the 10 years roughly 4.3. Mortgage rates are roughly 7%. So it's like a 270 basis point spread between the 10-year Treasury and 30-year fixed rate mortgages. Like, I remember 1.8-ish. Like you said, it was, 1.5, 1.6, 1.8. But if we were anywhere near kind of historic levels, rates would be high 5s, 6%. And somebody explained that to me as well, like you said, is that like the volatility causes that spread to be extra large. So maybe moving forward, get some certainty around, presidency, inflation's under control, which I think the Fed even will say it out loud. They feel like inflation is somewhat under control. So I think they're more microscope on jobs and the economy than they are the inflation piece. But I don't know. It's a lot of stuff for the average person to digest. Where do you think rates are middle of 2025, Mr. Nash Paradise? I want to hear it from the wizard.
So let me walk through what I see happening, because you just set me up perfectly for it. Volatility gets slower. We know what's going to happen. And that's why the economic data, which may normally point to rising interest rates, could actually see that fall. I do believe that margin compresses a little bit for that slow decline. I think it's pretty safe by mid 2025 to be targeting the 30-year overnight average to be somewhere in that range of 6.125 to 6.3%. We've been there. We were very close to that in September, just because of like volatility still. But the market can sustain. What we saw is you get down to the high fives on interest rates, you start getting VA, USDA, and FHA loans in the mid to upper fives. You start to see a massive influx of applications and a lot of moving money. And like, that's kind of a floor that where we get to those points, we're going to bounce back up because the market can't yet sustain that with current supplies. So I do think that a nice, homeostasis and harmony begins in the upper sixes to mid sixes. And I think we could very well settle on the low sixes, just very small lateral movement. But that's my projection by the time we get to about the end of second quarter.
Sweet. I love it. Kate, do we got one more slide on here? I think there might be one more meeting to look at. Maybe not. I don't know. If there's no more of it, maybe just our two pretty faces. We got a few minutes left before 9 o'clock. And so I'm just going to remind people, like, you want to operate as a buyer of real estate in markets like the exact one we're in, where rates are a little bit higher, people are a little bit uncertain, and quite honestly, like, we're in the fourth quarter. If I, what's funny, Nash, I've been in mortgage for 10 years. I don't think it was until 3 or 4 years ago where I actually looked at like home price averages, where like almost any market you choose in the US, if they go up 6% annually, right? Just like pick a market across the US, that's like a 10% increase January through June. And then they go down 4% July through December. Like that's an oversimplified version of it. But home prices, generally speaking, are lower in the winter than they are in the spring. There's more demand in the spring. There's more, stuff that pushes up prices. And so I don't know, what's your experience? Because I'm more exposed to California than anything else, and that's kind of how it rocks out here. You guys get the similar stuff in Texas where, sellers in the winter need to sell and might reduce to move it.
So don't California my Texas with your experience, Matt. Sorry. We got bumper stickers for that out here. Now, I've been saying the same thing for 19 years. It's all, buyers have an advantage in the wintertime. People are less inclined. Lots of people move. Why do people move? A lot of times it's for schools, but a lot of people that are moving because they want to move up, they make those plans out of convenience. Makes sense to move in the summer. They like to look at during the spring. Homes look better in the late spring, early summer. When sellers have the ability to be patient, sell when they want to sell, they want to sell when their home is going to show the best, when that pool gets showed off. Especially, our heat here in Texas in the summer is kind of ridiculous. And in the winter, man, just good guess. It could either be -8 degrees and snowmageddon and our power grid fails and we have no water and electricity. That was fun. Or it can be, 75 degrees. Like it's been the mid 70s this week here. I'm wearing a sweatshirt because we keep our office cold and, I got to rep the brand, but you never know. And it's not a good time. I think one of the biggest underlying factors that it was worth bringing up that I don't know that everyone is considering is the percentage of mortgages that are under 4% right now nationally. So I don't think, I'm putting a big emphasis on that. Like the supply problem isn't going to get better anytime soon. I mean, we're talking 10, 15, 20 years. There are a lot of people who are saying, you know what? I got these golden handcuffs. I got a 2.75 rate. I'm not selling because affordability is the biggest consideration. When you look at inflation, everything else, like what is inflation actually? It's affordability. How far can my money go? And I can't compare something at a, sub 3% rate to something that's even in the mid 6s or low 5s. So as we are looking forward and trying to encourage buyers, like, yeah, the rates matter, but do they matter as much as finding a house you want to be in for the next 10 years? We know with the volatility, we're going to see lower interest rates at some point. Is it the next 9 to 12 months or is it in the next 24 to 36? We don't know. The rate isn't forever. But if you can get in that market, wherever you are in the country, where you're getting that house for 15, 20, 30 grand less than you would in the midsummer, or if you're a low down payment person who can't really compete, can't guarantee the appraisal, like the call to action right now is if that's you or those are your clients, they need to be the ones taking action now, because waiting a year or 2 years because you keep getting boxed out, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in net worth to your family that you don't have a way to save up enough to make a bigger difference in that amount of time. Affordability is still going to be an issue going forward. You need to be front of line.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. So my parting words are like, anytime I see something that says to get back to the home affordability we had in 2018 or 19, you need prices go down by 35%, rates go down by 2%. It's not going to happen. That's the simplest way to put it to people is like, I'm sorry. I wish things were cheaper. I wish mortgage interest rates were lower, but like, that's not how it works. You don't get more affordable housing because you raise your hand and go, you know what? Little bit out of my reach. I'd like it to be slightly more affordable. Please and thank you. Like that just doesn't happen. So if you're in a position to buy, reach out to somebody that you like at UMortgage, and we'll help walk you through getting pre-approved and all that good stuff. Thanks for joining me, Nash. This was awesome, brother.
Always a pleasure. Always good to see your pretty face, man. Love this stuff.
You're going to get to see me in person 2 days. See you there, buddy.
What? Okay.
Yep.
You made my week.
NXT visit. It's on the books. See you guys.
Take care.